Sounds like a funny mashup.
Probably from all the spit.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. You are listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed in the show are our own unless otherwise stated and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. We are the Philosophy Club Radio Hour, the award-winning Philosophy Club Radio Hour. That's right, folks. I won a Grammy. Could you believe it? Pretty
No.
Nobody can. But believe it, I did it, Mom. All right, guys. I do want to make this announcement. The Philosophy Club Radio Hour won first place in the category of in-depth multimedia story at the Texas Intercollegiate Press Association convention that was hosted in Dallas downtown over the weekend. How about that?
I submitted you guys back in December.
Yes, thank you to our producer engineer Jack Fletcher for being, he's really great at scouting talent, and he knows it when he sees it.
Hooray!
And especially when it's as undeniable as this. So we'll call it a joint effort, joint initiative. I couldn't be more thrilled about that. I mean, guys, you're part of an award-winning, locally recognized. You're like friends of a really great host. What do you guys say? I take that back. Friends is way too strong a term. But, yeah, so that's pretty cool, guys. That means we're doing something right, according to those who vote. And
who votes?
I think my grandma.
My grandma probably.
I wrote my dog.
She works on campus.
That's true. She's my colleague. And a good friend of mine. Shout out Barbara Stallings. Okay, so let's get into this. We have some more announcements to make as well. Again, this is the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. That's an extension of the Philosophy Club. Philosophy Club meets every Tuesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in room EO32, and then we record a live radio sesh from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock in EO11 KDUX Studios. And then today is the monthly installment in the Philosophy Club's Philosophy and Film series. Film.
I think it should have an extra L, so it's film.
Basically spelled phlegm.
What's the time? It's time to get film. Okay, so today we are screening Donnie Darko, which is a cult classic. It was a very popular movie among me and my group of friends back in high school. So, back in the 80s. And it's pretty popular nowadays as well, I think. Today's topic is time, and so we selected a movie that deals with time, specifically dimensions of time and potential time travel and the fragility of time and time versus choice and how you can change time or if you can change time. Time may change me.
And if you're watching from the future and you've had any issues with the movie, please direct all complaints to Professor Mancy.
A.K.A. David Bowie.
No complaints. So yeah, guys, that's what's happening today. There'll be some pizza there as well as soda, provided by y'all's truly, and we'll be having a discussion on Donnie Darko afterwards. So before we get into everything, let's get into first and foremost introductions. We will start at the end there, as we are wont.
Okay. I am the Buddha, and I have reincarnated here to teach you about time. To my right is Stephen Hawking, who's also been reincarnated.
Oh my gosh.
to teach us all about
Too
time.
soon.
Too soon?
Didn't we just have a discussion about
I think
too
we
soon
did. I
comedy?
think we
We did. I
Discussion
thought we
about
said
too
that
soon.
it was never too soon.
Yeah, we agreed it's never too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Could we, though?
It's never too soon.
Yeah, but it has to be funny.
Whoa, what is soon? Honestly.
What is time, really?
What is soon? Good call.
It's
All
been
right.
it's been ages since that happened.
Let's discuss.
Time isn't real. There's no
Well-
such thing as too soon.
I'm Daniel, obviously. Yeah, you're welcome.
Obviously. Welcome, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
I'm going to remain anonymous. I'm a time traveler from the future to help with this discussion.
Interesting. Doesn't that make you Marty McFly?
Hey.
Is that
He
an old reference?
basically is Marty McFly.
You-
we should call him
we
Chicken.
agreed not to tell anybody about
We
this.
should call him Chicken and see if he freaks out.
Can I be Doc? Does that make me Doc
Yeah,
in this
that'd be pretty
scenario?
cool, actually. It could be Doc.
Jonathan, we
no
have
one
to go
ever-
back to the future.
No one ever explained how those two became best friends.
It's so-
just
it's
this
so creepy.
old guy and this young
This, like,
kid
high school
are just
kid.
best friends For no apparent reason.
He's a scientist. He's either 40 or 80. It's unclear how old he is. That's a very good point.
That's still true, Christopher Lloyd.
No one knows.
Oh boy! Thanks for listening, guys. It's been a great show. You are listening to Kid. No.
That wraps it up.
He's the same age he was before because time is an illusion, though. That's why you can't tell.
He went from taxi cab to the DeLorean. Not too shabby.
Mm.
Hello, folks. Welcome back. My name is Professor Manzi. I am the faculty advisor. And who do we got to my right here?
My name is Kalen Scoggins. I'm an adjunct faculty member here at Richland College in the government department.
We comprise 2/5 of the Richland Adjunct Faculty Association, for the record. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Treasurer and interim president.
Interim treasurer and
Interim treasurer.
and interim president. Yes.
What is an interim? That brings
In-
us to our next
inter-
question.
Right. was
In
what it was
term
time.
or in turn?
Interim.
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 I say interim. Interim.
I have a bad vocabulary, so I don't know.
Temporary.
That wasn't a
replacement?
joke. I don't know why I laughed. It's
It
actually
kind of means in the meantime or until the next one, which is
Yeah.
a very tense or temporal concept.
yes.
In the interim.
So there's stuff likes I said. So you've heard of term, interim. There's a relation. Okay, guys. So let's get into this here. We'll go to the requack.
Oh, okay.
I keep leaving my duck bill in my car. What a ducktail. Woo!
Now it's in my head the whole day. Thanks.
Okay, guys. See, this is what they give us the award, and now can I just say we're off a little bit?
We're done now. We've already got an award.
We got the award. We
We have
don't need
nothing
anything
left to
We're mailing
prove.
it in.
Pack it in, guys. It was good.
We went out of the entire tri-state area. That's a real accomplishment.
It is. It's a big state. Speaking of which, big states, state of affairs, affairs require time. Let's talk about time.
Okay.
Let's talk about
Long
your
walk for a
affairs.
short drink of water.
The question we were going over today was what is time? So I guess we could start on that.
Mhm.
If we want to define it individually, let's start with you, Manzi. How do you define time?
Could you go ahead and start us off with that Augustine quote, actually, just about the difficulty of kind of nailing down time?
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it's appropriate because, I mean, the first time I'll say this: the first time I seriously considered time.
First time.
The first exactly. And the first time I seriously considered time as a philosophical concept was when I read Augustine's Confessions, because he deals with it so explicitly. So yeah, Augustine says rather famously or infamously, he says, "I know exactly what time is until somebody asks me to explain time, and then I have no idea what time is." And we encountered that for an hour, folks, at the recent philosophy club meeting. But it was it was good stuff. So having said that, yeah, an understanding of time for me, it seems to be some sort of combination of natural time, quote unquote, versus human time. So some sort of synthesis thereof. I think time itself, insofar as it's so intimate, a part, or I don't even want to say a part. It is what we are. Human beings are time itself. The way we exist is very much characterized by our temporality. And so it seems to me that human time is the authentic understanding of time as we experience things in terms of changing, coming to be, passing away, specifically with regards to how we value certain things doing that, our physicality. And then we use natural markers by which to, again, demarcate the passing of time.
I think that human time, the way we talk about it as the measuring
Think
of
about
this
it.
natural time,
Yes.
that's just we say that that's the human part and then this is the natural part, but this is still an observation. Natural time is still an observation from humans.
Yeah.
So still, how can we prove that that even exists without humans to be there to watch it? I mean, obviously duration goes by, but
Yeah.
not in the
It's a
not
great
in the
point.
same rate that we view it as. I mean, think about the way that a fly
Think
looks
about
at
it.
time. Think about it, yeah. So a fly will view me going a lot slower than I would view myself as going, just because that's the way that they're wired. That's the way they see things. Turtles view us as going faster because that's the way they see it. So from the perspective of some other, like maybe extraterrestrial life form or something, they might view us as just like little ants moving around really, really fast or something like that. we don't know how long or how stretched or short time actually is from a completely objective point of view. So how does it even there to begin with? Maybe humans are the only people or the only things that view it as forward, as linear like that.
Yeah, a historical sense of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And any thoughts on that?
I was gonna say, but we view time not just as like we view time as moving forward because there's a cause, there's every action, life is cause and effect basically,
Okay.
right? And this only goes in one way. Your cause will cause whatever the cause is will have an effect to the future. Whatever
So
or
you're
something
essentially saying
causes
that
a
there's a
change.
domino effect going into
Yeah,
it.
it affects the future, and this only goes forward. If we were to go, I mean, I suppose if we were to go backward, the effect would become the cause, or
Yeah, I guess.
or
Would it become the cause, though?
It would appear to, I think.
Can causes not be simultaneous with effects?
Aren't there some philosophers who disagree that cause and effect is an actual thing?
Hume.
How many questions in a row can we link together here?
I don't know the philosophy of Hume very well, but I'd like to hear something about how he thinks cause and effect isn't an actual thing.
Well, he thinks that we just can't know whether it is or not, that we never actually observe causation. All we ever observe are constant conjunctions of things. We only ever observe correlation. We never actually observe causation, was Hume's argument. We see event A, and then event B almost always follows event A, but all we ever see is those two together. We never actually see or observe causation as such.
Yeah, we
Now,
assume correlation.
Right.
If you've
I,
ever
I
heard-
don't, I don't subscribe to that, but
Yeah.
that is his argument.
If you've ever heard no causation without representation, then you're familiar with Hume. I think
Don't abuse my discipline like that.
I mean, there's a way that Alan Watts would have said it, which is kind of like you can't have a back without a front, just like you can't have a cause without an effect. They're two parts of the same thing.
say what?
Right, and Hume would certainly seem to disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sees events as entirely, as he put it, loose and separate, whereas Watts would seem to be going more in the direction of that cause and effect are really kind of, you're talking about the same thing from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Which is a very non-Humean way to look at it. So yeah, those are two different perspectives we could talk about regarding change, or I guess more specifically, cause and effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
Sorry, go ahead.
I've heard a lot of arguments toward time as a dimension, kind of like a space that can be traveled, just like forward, backward, up, down, left, right. That's kind of thing.
That's specifically the Minkowski interpretation of space-time. Yeah.
How
Let him know,
how exactly
Caleb.
does that go?
Excuse me.
How exactly does that go? If you could like interpret that better than
So
me.
yeah, first of all, I'm not a physicist.
Yeah.
I'm not a philosopher either, for that matter. But I'm here
Yeah.
on the show anyway.
Doc.
So, yeah, my understanding is that the kind of the Minkowski interpretation of Einstein's special relativity posits what we might call kind of a four-dimensional space-time block, and is kind of undifferentiated.
Yeah.
That our experience of time is purely perspectival, because we're at a certain place in this kind of four-dimensional block, that is the entire universe. But time as such is really just tenseless or eternal. We really talk about just different slices of that unified block that we happen to be occupying.
Like it's a block that's solid that's already happened all at the
Right.
same time.
It's all in the from a purely objective perspective on this four-dimensional space-time view. Yeah, everything that ever was and is has already happened and has always been happening, kind of in a way.
I got you.
So that we may perceive the flow or change of time, but from a purely kind of third-person neutral objective perspective, time isn't really, or there is no such thing as change in the way we normally think about it. It's all just kind of an undifferentiated, again, four-dimensional block of the three dimensions of space plus time. And that's how you account for the relativity and perspectivalness of different aspects of both place and the kind of locational perspective and temporal perspective. Again, I don't subscribe to that either, but that is
Okay.
the that's the argument of that particular interpretation of relativity as it applies to time, as I understand it. If there's any physicists listening, please comment on the YouTube video and correct us.
Does that really indicate that there would be no such thing as change, because there'd still be a difference between time A and time B, right?
So, but only not in a truly tensed way is the way that they would describe it. So there's kind of two main ways of looking at time in that situation.
Well, what do you mean by tensed exactly?
So to say that something, did happen, or has happened or will happen, can only purely on this tenseless theory of time, you're at best speaking kind of, I don't know, in a kind of illocution, or I'm trying to think of the right way, metaphorically rather than literally, or you're only speaking kind of subjectively, but objectively, everything has already happened, or rather actually is happening right now. Right. There is really no such thing as a real past or future, because it's all just a block that already exists.
That would be
sounds like a gerund.
On a truly tensed theory of time, only the present is truly real. The past no longer is. The future is not yet.
Yeah.
Only the present truly is.
That sounds like a difference between determinism and free will.
You could argue that there are some implications for that debate, depending on which theory of time you take. Sure.
Yeah,
that would be an interesting direction to take it in too.
Yeah, but in either case, it seems like our perception of time is due to a limitation of ours, an inability to understand the greater whole and all of its beauty, however you want to put it. So time is sort of the result of our limited perception, our limited perspective. That is one, I would say, very traditional understanding of time. You can call it more scientific based. You can call it more empirical observation than the theories derived therefrom. Other definitions of time include stuff that's much more, I guess how you say, less quantum oriented and more, I suppose, human oriented. So time is something that's inherently value laden. So to discuss time in this sort of abstract, rarefied, speculative way is super interesting and fascinating when it comes to trying to figure out what the thing in question is. But keep in mind, we're talking about these things in an objective, investigatory sense, exploratory sense. And yet, it seems like in an actual human experience of time, goes beyond the mere observation that time is passing or that we have a perspective on time. The time always seems, again, united with, and I'm going to say it for like the third podcast in a row, indelibly intertwined with so many other dimensions of human existence, namely value itself, such that the subjective perception of time, again, in the way that we exist, in the way that we are, is inherently connected to the way we understand other aspects of our lives and how they're unfolding in time, such that you can really take two approaches. Shout out to Paul Ricoeur. He wrote a 3-volume work called Time and Narrative, where he, especially the very beginning of volume 3, where he goes through the tradition of Western philosophy and discusses, here's what Aristotle thought time was, and here's what Augustine did to tweak that. And then you really watch the change from a more naturalist understanding of time to time as something existential in its essence, which is a funny way to put it. But yeah, I think, suffice it to say that I think for time, everything that has to do with time, all forms, all matters of investigation, no matter how precise or mathematic or scientific or theoretical, it all comes back to actually derived from the experience of being a human being, which is inherently mortal and therefore inherently forced to reckon with our temporality. And I think considerations of time are part of how we reckon with it.
I've got kind of an idea that's brewing a little bit about why do we consciously perceive time in the duration that we do? Why don't we perceive it faster or slower than we do? Is this just, does any perception of duration just kind of like, just like if you were to become desensitized to anything, does it all just come back to one kind of understanding of this is how long something is? If it's really slow, then it'll come back to kind of a relative standpoint, or if it's really fast, it'll come down to a relative standpoint, maybe.
Yeah, you seem to be kind of getting at or asking the question of what is it that grounds time?
Yeah.
Which is a good question.
I mean, I would just, I guess, posit something. It's, well, let's go back to, and this is what I was trying to emphasize in Philosophy Club. Start with your experience of somebody who, again, is enmeshed in time, and then go from there. It seems like we have experiences where we'll look at the clock, and it seems like the minutes are passing by like seconds. Usually, I think the example in the club was, if you're really enjoying something, but also if you're in a hurry, it seems to me. If you have, 30 minutes to submit your essay, time is flying by. Or if you realize I have to leave at 10:45 if I'm going to get to my 11 a.m. class, and you wake up and you're tired and you're maybe, I don't know, hungover, and you're moving, but you know that you're moving too slowly.
Yeah.
And so you say to yourself, my understanding of time is wrong, because here's how much time has passed, regardless of how it feels, of how I perceive it. So the grounding does seem to be in yet another human contrivance, another human invention, which is to say, here's what we agree to call 5 p.m. on March 13th, 2018.
But also something a little less conscious about when it comes to perceiving time differently. If we're in a life or death situation, time actually does slow down. We have a lot of reports of people seeing time as slower, and they can look around and notice things that are happening at a more detailed rate. So your mind kind of slows your perception of time down for you to be able to figure things out a little bit faster when you're in a life or death situation.
I was going to say, I think in that case, though, your mind actually accelerates. And so the rest of the world seems to move slower by comparison. Because
Right.
you are thinking and you're reacting faster. Your reaction time is so much faster with all the adrenaline that it seems like everything else is slow
Mm-hmm.
merely because you are faster.
So would it be the question of time is a perception due to your adrenaline?
Eat that mic.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So would it be the question of adrenaline or how excited you are, whatever's going on in your mind, wherever you're getting so excited that the time perception actually goes a lot faster than what it actually is? Because if we're talking about the hangover situation, our adrenaline's not up at all.
Mhm.
We're slow, muggish. That's the exact way that our mind is thinking at that point. So
Yeah.
our perception gets altered at that point.
I think that the more thoughts that are happening in your head, the more time you kind of perceive, because then you're consciously thinking about more things that are happening. So that means you have more increments of time to measure things off of. And the less thoughts you have, like when you lose yourself in an activity, if you lose yourself in something that's really fun, or you lose yourself in your work, if you really have a job that you love and you're just having a blast doing it, then the time just passes super fast because you're not really thinking about things. You're just doing that kind of thing. You're not focusing on anything other than the act of what you're doing. But if you're really introspecting and you're looking really deep into thought processes and things like that, then time goes really slow. Or if you're really thinking about the time that's passing, then the time goes really slow. You have more increments of memories that you've had, of thoughts that you've had to look back on.
I think this all does seem to kind of tie back into Jeff's original point about time being kind of a synthesis of kind of what we would call natural time and then human experience. It seemed to be kind of tying in all those things. So all the things we're talking about as far as the adrenaline kind of accelerating the pace of your mental activities relative to the other events that are happening at the same time. Seems to be again, you're talking about relations between your own perceptions and and how your own kind of internal mental state is changing relative to how everything else around you is changing, and kind of the inverse relationship when you're talking about being hungover, everything else like whoa, slow down, you're going too fast for me to keep up with right now, right? If you're really hungover or you're on prescription medication, you're cough syrup or whatever, and that seems to me to kind of
They call that hair of the dog.
That seems to me that kind of, I would say that's evidence that change is kind of what it is that grounds time. That time is really, in kind of every situation, a measure of change. But to the extent that different things change in different ways, whether it's humans change in different ways than other things do, and even individual humans, different situations, your mental processes or changes are happening in different ways. That's what kind of accounts for the relationship between your own internal mental state and things that are happening around you to that perception of time. So it seemed like thinking of time as being a measure of change itself would seem to account for both the fact that we can kind of feel out of sync with other things, and that we all can experience time differently at different times. It was grounded in the way we ourselves are changing.
So how about the time before
That was really well put.
consciousness, though? That was really well put. That really put the idea into my head very well.
I long to
What do
hear
you mean
that
by
from
the
you.
idea before consciousness? What do you mean by that?
Oh,
Sorry.
time before consciousness, that's if the tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? I think that's especially true with time. If there's no one to perceive the time that's happening, there's no relative aspect of something that's happened before, no consciousness, then the entire universe up until humans or something conscious existed could have been just like one moment, really.
So I think you're onto something, but I would kind of tweak it or locate that that idea at a different level. So if time is the measure of change, then I don't think it's consciousness that is constitutive of time, but change itself. So as long as things are changing, if there's no one to observe the change, there still would be time. You think of time as an effect of change. But if there's just nothing, or if there's something around, but it's not changing, then in a real sense there would be no time. Because there's no change to measure.
But that's an impossibility, it seems.
Hydrogen can't be self-conscious of its changing, though.
Sure. But my point is that if we go with, again, time as a measure of change rather than measure of the consciousness of change, then consciousness is not itself constitutive of time. It can add a very unique element, to time. Again, you won't have this weird, there's going to be if there's no one to perceive or no consciousness to perceive, you're not going to have this kind of out of sync relationship in an adrenaline situation or a hangover situation. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that would justify you in saying, therefore, there is no time, full stop.
Yeah, I don't know. I beg to differ on this. I think that, first of all, John, Keelan, I'm sorry, I had your volumes both turned down that entire conversation. Can you guys repeat what you said? For the radio. I think that, again, it goes back to the dissolution of the subject-object dichotomy. Your standard phenomenology, where it's there without a perceiver, there is nothing to be perceived in such a way that it means anything. Such that, you can say change is happening, the sun is setting, the sun is rising. Those are the staples by which we tend to judge time, but that's precisely it. It's our judging of time that makes it time. Otherwise, it's just change. The difference between change and time. You could say time is based in change. That doesn't. I think someone is equivocating, Kayla. That doesn't mean time is change.
I didn't say time was change. I said time is the
you
measure
implied
of
it.
change.
Dang it!
No, I explicitly said time is the measure of change. Now, when it comes to
So
any,
who does the measuring,
when it
and
comes to
who's there
any-
to observe the measuring?
when it comes to any kind of measuring, though, you can the type of measurement you use is going to be arbitrary in some way. When it comes to, again, the sun rising and falling, the vibrations of quartz.
But that's my point, is that they're not
time.
arbitrary. We pick those for very real reasons. We pick them so that because they're important. We need to know when high noon is, so we can be able to harvest the resources. So now we'll
Right,
call
but
it-
whether you judge high noon by the position of the sun in the sky, the position of the shadow on the sundial, the location of the hand on the clock, that's a more or less arbitrary choice.
But I don't think so. I think it's rooted in a genuine need humans have to feed themselves consistently. And so we have to find the right times for harvest, seasonally speaking, daily speaking.
That was the thing that made time a thing, but that's not really the necessary argument anymore, I don't think.
It's-
I guess let me
Well, I
put it this
think
different
so.
way. I see those as different means to the same end. You seem to be kind of identifying, we have this need, this end that needs to be met, but as far as the need to coordinate or to feed ourselves, things like that. But the particular devices we use to measure things for that end, I think, are just that. They're means. And there can be prudential considerations, regarding the means, but those prudential considerations would then not be necessary.
Well, I think they're for the sake of efficiency. And
Sure.
so I think that makes them more than merely arbitrary.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe
Which we're trying to hone
I probably arbitrary is maybe a poor choice of words for that. It should be there are
Well, maybe the
But I
choice
think you're right that
between
it
which
seems
clock you pick
arbitrary.
is
That's what's so
arbitrary.
funny. What's that?
The clock, the choice between which clock you pick is arbitrary, not the clock itself.
The clock
right?
design, maybe something
Yeah,
like
it's,
that.
we pick a sundial. You say
How would
you just
do it
measure the
essentially?
sun. Yeah, you just look at a clock. That's arbitrary. But I mean, the measurement of time. I guess that's what you're getting at. Is
Well, see, even the measurement of time, I think, seems to be kind of a weird, redundancy to me.
Kind of,
If
yeah.
time,
Yeah.
is
I see
like,
what you're
again,
saying.
if time is a measure of change, then if you're talking about a measure of time, you're talking about kind of a meta measure.
Yeah,
a
and that-
measurement of a measurement.
and that
this gets
gets-
into what Jeff was talking about, it being an abstraction in a lot of cases.
yeah.
Depending on how you're using it.
But it's that's the difference between what we were talking about as natural time versus human time. Human time is just kind of like meta measurement of the idea of time, which is just the initial measurement of stuff that's happening.
I think there are different ways of measuring or representing just change in a lot of ways. Because again, time as a measure of change, I would see time as kind of a function or effect of change.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind, we wouldn't measure change if it wasn't significant to us with which to begin. So the very reason that we decide change is the standard by which we assign a temporal demarcation is because those things that are changing are seriously necessary for us to maybe one day survive, but now it seems to flourish or pursue our projects in as efficient a way as possible, such that again things are changing all the time, and in that sense you could say they're subject to time. But if they don't matter to you, you're not going to measure the change. You're not going to consult them. They might as well not be changing from your particular perspective.
See, I just don't see how that would necessarily apply, though. Just because we haven't measured the length of a tree doesn't mean it has no length or height.
Well, going back to the root cause of time itself, which is to say, I guess what I'm trying to say is this. I have a hard time, and I said something similar with language. I have a hard time imagining human beings ever being alive where they weren't mindful of time passing.
I can agree with that, yeah.
But I think that's precisely because the things that they notice that are changing are things that are significant to them. So they have to monitor that change because it resonates in their actual concrete lived experience. So the things that we initially, so this is where time comes from. It's measuring things that are necessary for our survival, and then, down the line, our promotion, our flourishing, our projects.
But I would say that how humans discovered, discovered time or the origins of time would be different from what time is. Those are two separate questions.
See, and that's what I'm trying to collapse those. I think you can only ask what time is after we have originally discovered time. So the fact that we have the leisure time to consider what time is a result of the fact that we first invented it. Yeah.
Well, so I would say that, yeah,
So it
obviously
becomes a
we're not
project.
going to ask about what time is unless we have some experience of time and change.
Yeah, experience,
clearly.
but not merely
Right.
experience, stuff that means something to us.
Right, meaningful
That
experiences.
focuses us
of-
on the problem
of time
time.
and change, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like,
You guys still here?
yeah,
Right.
Sorry, go ahead. This is just, no one should listen to me and Jeff show.
I feel like
We got to do it.
we can take this asking measurement of time. You said like just because we don't measure a tree doesn't mean that it doesn't have a length. We can take that same thing as time metaphorically. We can take what does it mean that something has a length, and we can look at a length of something. What does that even mean that we can measure the length of something, or we can measure the duration of something? So I think let's take it down a notch and look at length. How do we determine what length actually is? What a distance actually is?
What's a notch?
A notch? Like a measurement?
Yeah.
Like-
I think it's funny that, again, you're using a term of measuring distance to talk about measuring distance.
Measuring distance.
Is a notch a measurement of distance, like different notches, or is it?
A notch
I
is
mean-
What
just,
is a notch?
a notch is
I'm
like
thinking of knots.
a
Oh, knot is like a knot, as in
Like
yeah,
speed or something?
Yeah.
you if you're
Yeah,
duck hunting and
okay,
you like make
okay.
a notch on a stick to see how many ducks you've shot. you
Oh,
know?
like notches on the belt. Okay,
Yeah.
I get
or
it,
the
I get
notch of like a bow and arrow, something.
it. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I got confused. I was thinking of knots.
Oh, okay. Well, I was
Knots
talking
landing.
about like length, how it can be a metaphor for time. So if we think of what is a period of time, we could say the same thing about what is a measure of distance. What is distance? I don't know. Does that make sense in any way to compare those two?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
are
they're
you-
readily comparable. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I think you said this as well. Time and space are, and we'll bring up if we have to, but time and space go together.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like rama lama 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 ba ba da ba ba da.
I think if you don't mind me like going on that point a little bit.
No, please.
Go for it.
So time and space, just if you have an object, there has to be time to age that object. But you can't have time without an object to have an effect on it.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. That's why they're linked. That's why there's a time-space plane that we all
Continuum.
exist in.
Yeah.
There's
Yep.
the same thing with space and solid, like a back and a front, that kind of thing. It's like you can't have space without or you can't have solid without a space in it to define where the space ends, kind of.
Yeah.
And you can't have like a solid without an edges to define where the edges end, you know?
That's
And
one
again,
of-
I would probably go back to the point that I was kind of maybe too hardly harping on last week, which is, those things are inseparable, but I still think they are distinct.
Distinguishable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually one of Shel Silverstein's lesser-known works, Where the Space Ends. I'm looking at you, Braden.
Okay.
You ever
Well, just
read
like
Where
you
the
can't
Sidewalk
have-
Ends?
Yeah.
No,
Well, just
I
like you
haven't.
can't, arguably you can't have, if something has color, it must also have shape.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that color and shape are the same thing.
Well,
Right.
yeah, okay.
But you can't have one without the other.
Right. They're inseparable. You will not find one in isolation from the other. That doesn't mean that they're the same thing or
Like bees
identical.
and flowers
You'll,
too.
you'll
You're
never
gonna-
find one without the other in real experience, though.
Mhm.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, at the same time, we as humans don't know, just as time and space are together, or time and just anything, a thing, an object doesn't. They go hand in hand. We don't know how to live without time. If we were to live without a time,
Exactly.
we're basically looking at a picture, a snapshot of a specific moment. And I think time really constitutes motion in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
where we can only see motion when it's just an object traveling a distance at a certain pace or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the best definition of time in the more Enlightenment scientific sense.
And-
Time is matter in motion.
Even when we see 2 points, like if with a flip book, if you have 2 points, a ball right here. Let's see, maybe I can do this. Ball right here,
There
and
you
then
go.
on the next page you have a ball right there. Like it, there's no actual like distinction between those. You just have a ball here and a ball here. If those are 2 frames of a video and you play them really close to each other, we'll assume it travels that distance. Our mind will fill in that blank. So maybe that's what time is kind of the distance, or the variable necessary for distance traveled.
Yeah, I would actually say that kind of is going to collapse more back into a Humean view of cause and effect, because then it's not actually the same ball
Yeah.
that is actually traveling. It's you have instant, temporal slice A of ball and then temporal slice B with an insurmountable kind of metaphysical gap in between them. And so you really don't have a thing that exists through time. You have 2 different things that exist at a different point in the space-time block under that type
Oh.
of view.
And we're kind of
Yeah.
filling in the blanks.
Does the space-time block have to do with Hume?
Not necessarily, although I think Hume's view or denial of the reality of cause and effect, and therefore of change in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
or at least of the reality of real causal relations, would fit more compatibly into a static space-time block view than it would with a more, I guess, what we call dynamic or tensed view
Yeah.
of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm very attracted to that block view of like a 4-dimensional block of space-time where everything kind of exists in one moment, and that we kind of travel through that, I guess.
That's eternity.
Yeah, eternity is just this one block, this one moment of everything happening and everything always happening. And I think that we it looks like we just have access to this point in time, but we can view the points that are outside of this point in time by planning. That's our ability to live in the future, is that we can...
Do we lose him in the audio?
Am I lost in the audio?
No, you're there. I'm turning the headphones volume down. Sorry, I'm messing with the headphones
Oh,
volume.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
I'm having trouble with the
we have the ability to change things that are ahead of us by planning. So that's our way of how Uche would say being more like God, and living in the moment, like Chris was saying, is yeah, trying to silence my opinion. Is that living in the moment is kind of more of the animalistic view. So like humans being the cross between animals and God, that we're the half divine kind of thing between that, That
so
we can
the weird. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh yeah, that we can look into the future and change the future by planning, and also live in the moment. And we plan so that we can live in the moment. We plan things ahead so we can enjoy those later in time. So we have access to the godlike ability, so we can take advantage of the animal-like sensations.
Yeah.
See, the weird thing though is that
I
on
like
on that space-time block view though, there really is no such thing as the future.
Or the past.
Or the past. Yeah, exactly. There is nothing but just that present block, and you can imagine yourself as like an extended worm.
Yeah,
In this space-time
like
block.
I've been called that.
a spine,
Well, to where so you can't really say that something is in the future for you right now, or behind you in the past right now.
Yeah.
All you can talk about is past temporal segments of yourself that have always existed,
yeah, it's like
extended out.
this weird
through the
worm that
block.
travels through this whole block.
Right, but it's not like the future is ahead of you, because you is just your entire temporal existence
Yeah.
stretched out through that block.
But then
That's Augustine's
but,
theory of
we
time.
we get into
That's why I
the
don't like
argument of what is you, because every 7 years we have different atoms in our body, right? So every we change and
It
morph
is.
with the environment at all times. So if you actually saw a picture of that long worm thing that goes through that space-time block, there would be no edges defining where that worm ends, and that space-time block would just be different molecules exchanging and renewing different parts of themselves, so that you couldn't even define what that worm is.
Shout out Donnie
I,
Darko.
either way, though, you're still really ultimately denying that change really happens.
But
Yeah.
you say you have no future, but that's like saying
That's what my dad told
it's
me.
like you, okay. Yeah, that's like saying like there's nothing to like. You can have something in a different place in 3D, right? And you'll say like that's to the left, that's to the right of you. You can still distinguish between these two different points, even if maybe they all always exist, right? There's still distinguishable points between the future and the past, right?
The future and the past would be no different than saying my left and right arm
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, but those are distinguishable points, and those are
They are, but distinguishable not temporally.
It's an empirical residue.
Right, you're not talking about really different temporal parts in the way we normally mean time, as far as past and future. It'd be no different than saying my left arm is in the past, but my right arm is in the future, but they really all exist right now. That's what you're committing yourself to by conceiving of space-time as just this one static block. And I mean, and if that's what you want to do, then fine. Again, to me, that's kind of a tough bullet to bite.
Yeah, likewise.
Why is it a tough bullet to bite?
Because it seems so contrary, because it seems incoherent to deny the reality of change.
Yeah.
Even if you changed your mind, to believe this theory, it's like that seems to, you're going to deny that it was an actual real change. Instead, you've just always been in this state of having a segment of you extended in space-time that didn't believe there was a space-time block, and a different segment that does believe there's a space-time block, but it's all still happening right now and always has been happening right now.
I feel like this argument works really well for like scientific hard determinism. So thinking about that, all of this is happening because it's the only thing that could have possibly happened based on the laws of physics. That humans don't actually have change, we just have the illusion of consciousness, which gives us the ability to think that we make these changes. But really all of this is bumping together subatomic particles that bump together in this particular manner that we could find all the
Like a bump in the
variables
night.
for. Yeah.
Are you trying to convince me this is true?
No, I think this is just the argument for like hard determinism,
Sure, but like
which works with this.
you're making an argument expecting to maybe change my mind on it, right?
Maybe
Because it's a good argument rather than a bad one.
yeah, but I mean, would it?
In
would
which
it-
case, though, but no, you can't do that. Whether I believe your argument or not is entirely not up to me in this situation.
Yeah,
It's pure determinism, and I already either am always having been believing that, or or not.
but it was determined to end up like this.
You see,
Right.
It's not that you can't be convinced. It's that you were determined to be convinced or not before it happened.
Right. In which case, I'm just going to wait and see if I end up getting convinced or not. But
Yeah.
really, there's no point in you making the argument.
Well, you wouldn't.
There's no point to all of it then.
There's still cause
This or
and
any
effect in
argument.
determinism. It's just that we could predict what cause there is. Without the argument, you wouldn't be convinced.
So you you believe this is the case, but you know what? You couldn't have believed otherwise, so you can't help it. It's okay. I also don't have to. Either I'm going to believe you or I don't, but I have no choice in the matter.
Well,
Unless consciousness gives a different variable, unless consciousness is something that arrives out of this deterministic universe that has the actual ability to move things,
yeah.
to actually move things beyond the natural order of how they would normally move, that we have the ability to do things that are self-based, that I want to continue with providing for myself.
Yeah.
So I can move the universe in ways that it wouldn't usually have moved. I can move out of the way of a boulder that's falling, because if I didn't have the ability to move, that would have just crushed me anyway. So that's a different step, and I change things.
But you're making the argument on the basis of your conscious experience,
Yeah.
and if that conscious experience is just an illusion, I can safely disregard everything you're saying.
Right.
I was going to say I don't think determinism denies change so much as it denies that there were other possibilities for change.
Determinism as such doesn't deny change. Determinism coupled with the space-time block does.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think it does and it doesn't. It's and I think this is ultimately also what you're saying. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Go for it.
insofar as that we perceive change occurring, you could say that it occurs, especially if you want to grant precedence to your own subjective experience with regards to, again, that being from which you abstract all sorts of relations, theoretically speculative, that kind of thing. But beyond that, the reason it seems to be so persuasive for most people is because it's derivative in some sense off of a more ancient medieval theological understanding of things, where to try to understand how God can exist eternally, and that means there must be eternity. But if there's time, how can there be time in eternity? Well, if God is timeless, if he is timelessness, that means that everything that is in time, which means that God transcends time and space, as most popular denominations in Christianity advocate for. And so for that reason, this attempt to understand the idea of everything that's ever happened, ever will happen, already occurring and never not occurring in simultaneity, instantaneously, it's a human's attempt to try to account for something that is unaccountable for, given the limitations of thought, language, and of course our own mortal limitations. So what you have there is a scientific propping up, and not to belittle it, of a much more ancient medieval problem. But we still want to understand it in those terms that are deified, but still seem to remain with the fundamental premise that all things that are, is, and ever will be are always constantly coming to pass instantaneously, immediately. And really, if you want to really push it, it goes back to the fact that human beings experience time in this sense primarily because of the fall, that kind of thing. Then in some sense, time didn't necessarily operate in the Garden of Eden as it does nowadays. So all of that is by which to say this idea of time and understanding time as something that's diminutive or a diminished form of eternity, a diminished form of something that is already full and complete and robust. It's very, very, it has deep roots. That doesn't mean that it's accurate. And ultimately, I think I'd be inclined to believe you, John, that the consciousness, I would say self-aware, reflective consciousness, does change things in a very real way. It changes the phenomenon, and not merely your perception of the phenomena, it changes your phenomena, because the phenomena is your perception of the phenomena. That makes sense. So I think it's important to realize that this understanding of time, and again, it's not something that Kalen subscribes to, it's not something I subscribe to, but here's why it's so popular, and here's why we're talking about it, is because I think it's the most popular way of understanding how time works, because of its traditional religious cultural influences. Yeah, we're getting the exit cue here.
Oh, that's it.
I think we gotta go.
Okay.
Start wrapping it up.
Yeah, start wrapping
We're
it
out
up.
of
I've got
time.
one more question, actually.
Yeah, throw it out there.
Yeah.
Throw it out
I
there.
mean, how does it make sense that time had a beginning and will have an end?
Good question.
That's one of the Kantian antinomies, isn't it?
Because
Yes.
Then you have the question of what something has to cause time to start.
Yeah,
you
what
can-
existed before
yeah,
time?
Yeah, how can it? Well, no, it's
Well, you can't exist before
how can the
time.
first thing
It's just
how can the first
existing.
thing happen? It would have to have no cause. It would have to happen by itself, right?
An unmoved
Because
mover,
there's
yeah.
nothing previous to that to cause it to happen.
And that's where most religions call it God, or something that
Correct.
transcends that space-time type of thing.
It's
Huh.
essentially it's logically impossible to have this first thing happen because there's nothing to cause it before that.
Yeah, it's like
How could
everything.
time be eternal? Or how could time be without beginning? Is an equally, I think, paradoxical question.
I feel like it all kind of makes sense with that space-time block, that it's just one thing, that we have the illusion of moving through one bit at a time, but really
So
we're
how
just
did you
snaking
compare?
through it.
Sure
It
is
doesn't
comforting.
seem hard
So-
for
Yeah.
us to imagine that time goes on forever forward, though, does it?
No, but the problem.
Endless
the
time
pro-
is not eternity. Sorry.
No, and it's not. Endless succession of time is not the same thing as eternity at all. I'm more confused. Like I've been really puzzled with this for a while about how to conceive of time as having no beginning. If you think of even a space-time block as being a collection of events, let's say, I mean, would that be a fair description?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Space-time
Yeah,
block.
yeah.
Then, if time had no beginning, then right now we are sitting at the end of a completed series of an infinite number of events. But it's by definition impossible to complete an infinite series of events.
That's to complete an infinite series of events.
We
Hold
would
on,
have
let me
had
just
to,
get it.
by now, if time has no beginning, we would have had to traverse an infinite number of points, completed an infinite number of events,
But that's
or
why-
infinite series of points.
But time does have a beginning.
Well, again, but as I was saying before, time having a beginning carries its own set of paradoxes
Right.
with it, right? Like even speaking of before time seems to be contradictory.
Well,
Well,
I mean, I think if you do the Hegelian move and unite time with human history, so human self-awareness as that which is aware that change is occurring and then seeks to monitor it. That's the beginning of time.
But
The net value of everything is 0, right?
Net value in what respect?
Of infinity minus infinity, because there's infinite positive numbers and infinite negative numbers, right?
But there's still an infinite amount of infinite numbers in between all
Yeah,
of
but
them.
if you subtract all of that, if you add
Well, infinity minus infinity is still infinity.
Well, not necessarily. It depends. You can have two equal infinities, essentially, in a way. Like if you had 1 over 0 and you tried to, or you had 2 over 0 and you tried to subtract 1 over 0, you still have 1 over 0. It's an infinite number. But you subtract 1 over 0 and 1 over 0, you wind up with 0.
Well, 1 over 0 is an infinite. It's undefined.
Well,
I think that's an important distinction.
yes and no.
Okay, less math. I don't know what I was going at there. I kind of forgot.
Guys, speaking of going,
Anyway, sorry. Yeah,
we got to go.
Part
We have
two
to
off,
leave.
off
So,
track. Those are all really good questions.
Yeah, this is
though.
this was a
Yeah.
fun discussion. This was a great discussion. So I would say award-winning. Ladies and gentlemen, we have EO76 at 4:30. We'll begin the screening of Donnie Darko. There will be slices, not of time, but of pizza, which
In
I would say are even
15
better.
minutes.
And no worms. Hopefully.
And no,
There are worms, though. There are a lot of worms.
Lots of worms will have a segment there.
Yeah. There are, in fact, segmented man worms.
This is so
With no edges.
please join us. Please join us. You're listening to the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. Do you want to do shout-outs real quick? Any shout-outs? You guys want to say goodbye?
I'm good.
I'm going to shout out to Braden's mixtape.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's coming out in just a...
Yeah,
Oh, is it?
yeah, he's dropping it.
Yeah.
Buddha's
Okay.
dropping a mixtape, man.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right, that's about it for me.
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah. Welcome our new guest here. Hope you come back and join us. It was great
Appreciate
having
it.
you.
Yeah.
And your contributions in Philosophy Club were, I thought, very good today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody's contributions are good, but I thought yours were especially insightful. I'm not saying that to anybody else in the studio. All right, moving. Sure. I think I need to do a couple quick shout-outs just briefly here. On April 24th, John Ewing and I will be co-moderating a panel on student rights and the recent walkouts. It's going to be in the library, Lago Vista, L107, so come to that. The Philosophy
What time?
Student
Yeah,
Conference. Oh,
time.
I'm sorry. The time is, let me see if I remember here. I should have pulled this up while you guys are talking. I want to say, because I'm teaching noon, 12, 11, 10. I got to look it up. A time to be determined.
If only Haya was here.
Yeah, seriously, this is why we
We need to
keep
make
her around
Kaya
here.
come every time.
Anyway, just keep going. Shout outs.
Yeah, so let me move on with the show. What, are you the segment director now?
Only of worms.
Because it takes like a couple minutes to get over.
Yeah, guys. So the Philosophy Club, meets every Tuesday from 2 to 3 in EO32. We have the student conference. Oh yeah, let me announce this for sure, because this is a call for submissions.
We usually go over too.
So as you guys know, it's been a custom for the last few semesters now for the Philosophy Club the Philosophy program to host an undergraduate student conference. This year, for the first time ever, we are opening it up to all philosophy students in the DCCC. Not just Richland students, but all Dallas County Community College students. And in the fall, it's going to be an all-day affair. But Richland will continue to host it moving forward. So a few announcements about that in particular here. Well, let me tell you this. I love anchovies. Okay, here we are. So the deadline to submit a conference presentation proposal is April 13th on Friday by 3 p.m. So please do that. If you have written a paper in the past philosophy classes or you're writing one right now that you think is good, even if you don't have the grade for it, submit it. So it will begin at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, April 17th, and conclude around 3 p.m. So again, it's a Tuesday, so there will be overlap with the Philosophy Club, which is totally fine. If it's anything like last semester, I'll be giving the closing remarks and then racing over here to the radio show. It'll be about 15-20 minutes per presentation. Again, it'll be in Sabine, room 117. It's such an amazing opportunity. It's a professional conference. If you want experience as a proto-professional academician, then you should check this out. It's a lot of fun. We had a wide variety of presentations last time, everything from the nature of artificial intelligence to the moral ambiguity of pornography. A lot of really gripping stuff. And so I advise you to make it out here. And teachers, if you're listening to this, bring your students. Allow them to participate. It's, again, Tuesday, April 17th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. More on that in the future. And we got to conclude. We have the film screening in about 10 minutes. So that'll do it. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to... Oh, I'm sorry, Kalen. Did you have any shout-outs?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
right, thanks. You're listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed on this show are our own unless otherwise stated and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. Award-winning show signing off for the week. Don't forget, if you have the time, to think about
It.